You are the only animal on this planet that cannot survive on the food it evolved to eat. And we know that because people have tried. In 1999, researchers in Germany studied around 500 people living on raw food alone, and the findings were stark. Participants lost significant weight, and among the women under 45, roughly half stopped menstruating altogether. These were not people foraging in a forest. They had supermarkets, fruit bred over centuries for sugar content, blenders and olive oil, every possible advantage, and their bodies still began shutting down reproduction. So the question in the title is not about warmth or light or things moving in the dark. Fire is not something our ancestors picked up and used the way you might pick up a hammer. It is a digestive organ that lives outside your body, and you have depended on it since before your species existed. Take it away, and you don't get colder humans. You get something that was never human to begin with. The standard story is that fire gave us warmth, protection, and better-tasting meat, and all of that is true. It is also the least interesting part of what happened, because fire's largest effect was not on our environment, but on our anatomy. Run your tongue across your own teeth for a second, because the evidence is sitting in your mouth. A chimpanzee is our closest living relative, and a fair model for what an ape our size ought to look like. And it spends around 6 hours a day chewing with the jaw muscles, teeth, and long gut required to make that work. You chew for well under an hour, your jaw is weak, and your colon is dramatically shorter than a primate of your body size has any business having. Meanwhile, your brain accounts for roughly 2% of your body weight and consumes close to a fifth of all the energy you burn at rest. So you are an animal with an unusually expensive brain bolted onto an unusually cheap digestive system, and something has to be paying the difference. The explanation that best fits comes from the Harvard primatologist Richard Wrangham, and it is called the cooking hypothesis. Cooking, in this framing, is digestion performed outside the body. Heat gelatinizes starch and unravels protein, which means the work your gut would otherwise do with enzymes and time has already been done before the food arrives. Animal experiments show that identical food yields measurably more usable energy cooked than raw. Once that external stomach exists, evolution can begin dismantling the internal one, because gut tissue is metabolically expensive, and every calorie you stop spending on digestion becomes a calorie available elsewhere. That elsewhere was the skull, and the scale of it is easy to skim past. Over roughly 2 million years, the human brain more than doubled in volume, from about 600 cubic centimeters in our early ancestors to the 1,350 you are using to process this sentence. So ask where that energy came from, because a body does not simply find a spare fifth of its metabolism lying around. This is where it gets really interesting, because that trade was not a purchase. It was a one-way door. We did not add fire to a functioning animal. We removed the animal's ability to function without it, which is precisely why 500 people with supermarkets and blenders could not make raw food work. But fire did something else. Something with nothing to do with food at all, and it may be the reason you enjoy stories. Before fire, the day ended when the light did, and fire converted the night into several extra hours of usable time, hours in which you could not work, hunt, or forage, but could only sit and look at one another and talk. The anthropologist Polly Weisner spent years recording conversations among the Ju-Hoansi in Botswana and Namibia, and she found that daytime talk was dominated by practical matters, complaint, and the management of disputes, while firelight talk shifted decisively towards storytelling, singing, and the mythic. That suggests the peculiarly human habit of telling each other things that are not literally true. The habit underneath religion, fiction, history, and every video you have ever watched, including this one, may have needed darkness and a light source to develop it all. Now you might be thinking that surely we would have found another route to that energy. It is a fair objection, and the honest answer is that nothing else on Earth ever did. Every other species still eats its food the way its body is built to eat it, and not one found an alternative in 4 billion years. And fire is not one invention at the bottom of a pile. It is the precondition for nearly everything that followed. Because ceramics require a kiln, metal requires a furnace, and glass requires heat, you cannot generate any other way. Follow that last one for a moment. No glass means no lenses, and no lenses means no microscope and no telescope. So a species without fire would live and die without ever discovering that it is made of cells, or that it lives inside a galaxy. Which brings us to the strangest part of the whole thought experiment, because the animal at the end of it would not be sitting there regretting the absence of fire. There would be nobody in it capable of the thought. Picture it properly. It has a heavier jaw and a smaller brain. It spends 5 or 6 hours a day grinding raw plant matter. It cannot live anywhere cold, and with no pottery and no metal, it builds nothing that outlasts a single life. The question in the title can only be asked by a species that already answered it. There is something useful to take from this, and it is not a warm feeling about our ancestors, because we are doing it again right now. The pattern with fire went like this. We found something external that did a job our bodies did internally. We adopted it because it worked extraordinarily well. Our biology reorganized around the assumption that it would always be there. And by the time the dependency was total, there was no version of us left that could have chosen otherwise. Now look at what you have already handed over. You probably cannot navigate your own city without a device. You have stopped memorizing anything that can be looked up. And increasingly, you are outsourcing the framing of your own questions. None of that is a moral failing, and every step is as rational as cooking was. But the fire precedent tells you that this kind of trait is not a tool you pick up and put down. It is a change in what you are. It happens faster than anybody notices, and it does not run backwards. So choose deliberately rather than by drift, and recognize that you are deciding now while you still have a vote. Our ancestors never got one. Here's what I keep coming back to. We call fire the first technology, but that gets it backwards because fire is not the first thing we made. It is the first thing that made us, and everything distinctly human about you, from the volume of your skull to your appetite for stories told in the dark, arrived on the far side of it. And every fire you have ever seen is the same fire. The one on your stove, the one inside a car engine, the one burning in a power station miles away that is lighting the screen in front of you right now. It has never once gone out. In something like 1,000,000 years of human tending, we did not discover fire, we joined it. And then we became something that could not leave.